Tales of Mystica by Joey S. Hutton, aged 15. The Orbus Studios graphic novel Tales of Mystica, Book 1, Crochuse's Quest, is a reimagining and retelling of a story I made when I was 12 years old. In secondary school, my friend told me he had gotten his hands on a game-making software, and I suggested we collaborate. This was in the mid-2000s, when we swapped the files on our lunch breaks on blank CDs. We agreed that I would do the story and art, when he would do the programming and compiling. The project of the 2D platformer for the PC, Mystica, fell through by the time I was 13, but the storyline lived on in my mind. I recently made a reconstruction of what the original game would have looked like and uploaded to the Orbus Studios animation and comics YouTube channel. But back in early teenhood, I was left with a story with no way to express it. I developed it further in my mind, adding a Tales of Ear to the title, and fleshing out the story. Between year 10 and 11, my English literature homework for the summer holidays was to write a story. I knew just the one to write. Of course, I was 15 and very inexperienced with writing prose, and anything else for that matter, so the writing is very clunky and a shoddy quality. It had no chapters, strange dialogue, and flat character writing. But I can forgive myself for that. I believe it is important to preserve the history of what is now Tales of Mystica, so here is the original and novel I wrote. Joey S. Hutton, aged 30. Tales of Mystica. This is the world of Mystica. I was born in Truebrew village in the Throb Forest. My parents died when I was 2 and my grandfather took me in. But when I was 8, he mysteriously disappeared. After 6 years of looking after myself, my life changed a bit. This is the story of the cube. Crochus was in bed. He couldn't get to sleep. This night was unbelievably hot. Eventually, he gave up on trying to get to sleep. He got out of his bed and started pacing back and forth. He looked out the window of his hut. There were no clouds to be seen, just stars. Countless stars. It was as if the world was a disc covered by an enormous dome, encrusted with shining crystals. Crochus turned from the window. He took a sip from his aluminium cup of water. Water was no big problem in Truebrew village. The Throb Forest was humid, but the amount of rain it got was ridiculously high. Then a sound rang through Crochuse's ears. It was a combination of high-pitched screeching and an explosion. He looked out the window again. The sight shocked him as if he had been tickled by a throb tree. A white cyan object was hurtling from the sky to the ground. It's landed on the beach. Crochus muttered in his mind. He ran out of his hut and headed towards Galleon Beach. 5 minutes later, he reached his destination. The beach's sand was soft. Crochus's feet almost sunk into it. The sea lapped against the shore, giving off a soapy effect. The waves were calm. He could smell the salt from the sea. He looked around for the object he saw from his window. He saw a stone icon on his left. He picked it up. It felt satisfying to hold in his hands. It was very smooth. On it was an odd symbol. On the back of the icon was a small rendering of a cube. Suddenly, he felt very tired. So tired that he had to collapse. The beach disappeared. Crochus, barely awake, could just about hear a faint gong chiming. He quickly rose from the ground. He looked around. He was in the hall of a temple. On the walls were carvings of a 4-armed monster. 4 pillars were lined up against each wall. Behind him was a stone door. At the front of the hall stood 3 pillars, each had a slot carved in it. Crochus walked up to them. He still had the icon. He looked at the slot on the left. The symbol encrusted in the slot matched the one on the icon. It was obvious what he had to do. He inserted the icon into the slot. He woke up on the beach, slightly nauseous. I must take this to Ingerx, he thought. Ingerx was the local shaman of Trubru village. He was usually familiar with historical artifacts. The villagers described him as a tetchy but nice. Croesus would have taken the icon to Ingerx now, but it was 2 o'clock in the morning. He walked back to the village. Croesus woke up at 9 o'clock. He exited his hut. The villagers were locked in their own tasks. He traversed the bridge that connected his hut to the rest of the village, walked onto the middle of the village, past his friend, Hegener, and travelled across another bridge which led to Ingerx's hut. He knocked on the wooden door. Come, said old, yet casual voice. Croesus opened the door. He entered the one-room structure. The interior of the hut was a circular room with shelves built into the walls. On the shelves was a line of odd bric-a-brac. Just a few of these objects were a wooden jug, a row of yellow teeth that clearly didn't come from any humanoid, a metal sphere hanging from a piece of string, a very strange-looking plant, and others. Ingerx was sitting in the middle of the room. In front of him was a bowl of purple liquid. Ingerx himself was an aged man with shoulder-length grey hair. He wore a red robe. The son of Simitak, he said, what do you need? Croesus sat in front of him so that the bowl was between them. He showed Ingerx the icon he found the previous night. I saw this falling from the sky last night. When I picked it up, I had a vision where I was in a temple, he said. Ingerx examined the icon. I am not familiar with this symbol. He said, Look on the back. There's a picture of a cube, Croesus said. Ingerx looked on the other side of the icon, to see the cube. His eyes widened. What did the temple look like in your vision? He asked. There were carvings on the wall of a four-armed thing. In the vision, I put the icon in a slot. Said Croesus. What happened next? It ended. Ingerx closed his eyes. I have heard of this before. I myself cannot help you. But there is someone, here on the summit of Mount Tholine resides a mystic named Zychius. You must travel to Mount Tholine and show this icon to him. He will know what to do. Great, where's Mount Tholine? North. Is that all? Millimeter. Just keep going north, and then you will find it. It is just past Neo Bay. 20 minutes later, Croesus was preparing to leave Trubru village. He had to travel light, so all he took was a map of the continent, a compass, a hip flask, and a food pouch. And of course the icon. He also packed a few charms he had collected through his years. He was walking through the throp forest. He was used to the insects, but the heat was murder. He came to a wooden gate with 2 guards with spears. Password? He asked the guard on the right. Crows, he said Croesus. The guards opened the gate. He walked through. This was strange for Croesus. He had never properly left the throp forest before. He kept walking until he came to a grassy area. The weather was a lot more sunny than the throp forest. There was grass for as far as he could see. He could just make out the sea and 2 mountains in the distance. I really should have packed a tent, he thought. 1 hour later, he had made it to the other side of the massive field. He stood on top of a grassy hill overlooking the beach. The beach curved inward. Behind it was a forest. Ahead of the beach were 2 twin mountains. This must be Neo Bay, he thought. He walked down to the beach. He traversed along it. He accidentally stepped on a cone-shaped shell. It was unharmed. He picked it up and slid it into his bag. He came to a path that led into the forest on his right. He thought he might as well see what it led to. He followed the path. 2 minutes later he came to a lake, but it wasn't a normal lake. There was a small city built on it. Some of the dwellings were carved into the cliff. More official buildings were actually on the water. There were bridges that connected them together. The weather was, for some reason, very stormy. This was odd, a stormy lake next to a sunny beach. Croesus travelled across a bridge that led to the city. He walked into the local bar. The floor was just planks of wood 1 foot above the water. The ceiling was an orange-red canopy. He went over to the bartender and rested his arm on the table in an attempt to look tough. "Anything non-alcoholic, please," he said. The bartender narrowed his eyes. "How old are you?" he asked. 18, said Croesus. "You don't look 18. Neither do you." "That's because I'm 43. Can I just get a drink?" "Sure, but if my house is raided by soldiers because I let someone your age into my pub, I'll hold you personally responsible. Now, what did you say you wanted?" "Anything non-alcoholic." I bet you'll like this." The bartender poured a misty blue liquid into a pint glass and gave it to Croesus. "What's it called?" he asked. "Crocorler." "That'll be 2 minnows, please," said the bartender. "Oh, sip," thought Croesus. He didn't have any money. Trubru village used a trading system instead of currency. "How about, instead of money, I'll give you..." He searched frantically through his bag. "This cup of syrup from a siricone?" "Okay then. I suppose," said the bartender. Croesus walked over to a table with his crocorler. He sat down. "Nice man, you're sort of," he thought. He took a sip from his drink. It tasted sweet. That was odd. He expected it to be quite strong. "Hey kid, can I join you?" said a voice behind him. Croesus turned his head. A tall black-haired man was standing there with his glass. "Sure," said Croesus. The man sat opposite him. "So what's your name?" he asked. "Croesus," said Croesus. "What's yours?" "I'm Geotac. I haven't seen you before." "I'm not from here. I'm from the Throp Forest." "So, where am I exactly?" "You're in Hydralis." "Hey, you call that a drink? Try this." Geotac passed Croesus his drink. It was a crimson liquid. Closing his eyes, he took a sip. He felt as if his mouth was on fire. Then he swallowed it, and then he felt as if his throat was on fire. "Nicey," he wheezed. A bald man wearing a sky-blue cardigan came up to them. "Geotac," he said. Hello, Thai," said Geotac. He sat at the table. "Croesus, this is Thai," said Geotac. Nice to meet you," said Croesus. "Nice to meet you too. I've never seen you around here," said Thai. "I'm from the Throp Forest." "Really? What's it like?" "It's very humid. I live in a village in the trees." "Seriously? I've never heard of such a thing." "So what are you doing in Hydralis?" asked Geotac. "I don't think I should say," said Croesus. "I need to find a man called Zychius." He's on Mount Tholine," said Thai. "The one on the left is Tholine." He pointed to the twin mountains in the distance. Croesus finished his drink. "Then I'd better go up there." "I'm afraid that's not possible," said Geotac. "The way to the mountain has been sealed off." "Why?" asked Croesus. The north area of the beach is guarded by a fearsome creature known as the Opalin. The what? The Opalin, a large crab-like leviathan. It roams the north of the beach, preying on anything that moves. Some say that it is guarding something, said Thai. Anyway, said Croesus, I'm a bit tired. I've been walking for quite a while. Do you know where I can rent a flat? Oh, I've got a small flat. You can use that if you want to, said Geotac. 1 hour later, Croesus and Geotac were at the front door of Geotac's flat. All right, my pet Hathrin didn't want to leave. She hates leaving the flat, so you'll have to feed her twice a day, once at 2 o'clock and once at 7. The chow is in the cupboard by the bed, said Geotac. You're sure you don't mind me staying here? He asked Croesus. I don't mind. I'm going to be up all night anyway. There's going to be a bit of it's going to get a bit mad down at the pub tonight. Anyway, I'll leave you to it. Geotac left. Croesus opened the door. The interior of the flat was small, literally. It was just a bedroom. On the right of the bed was a glassless window overlooking the village. On the left of the bed was a wooden cupboard. Lying in the center of the bed was a yellow-orange creature. It was sleeping. When it breathed out, it showed its tongue. When it breathed in, it retracted its tongue. Croesus peered out the window to look at the sundial. It was 2 o'clock. It was time to feed the Hathrin. He opened the wooden cupboard. At the bottom, in the corner, was the tin of food. He picked it up and carried it over to a metal bowl with the word Eliho written on it. I assume that's your name, he muttered as he poured the contents of the tin into the bowl. The food was red chunks of meat in a strange yellow fluid. Eliho crawled over to the bowl and started eating. Croesus removed his bag from his shoulder and emptied what was inside onto the bed. He then collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep for a couple of hours. He woke up. He felt odd. Something hard was pressing on his head. He rubbed the dust from his eyes, only to find that he was upside down. He fell forward. He was lying on his stomach. He got up. He then realized that he himself was hungry. He rummaged through his bag and got out a food pouch. He opened it. Inside were also cubes of red meat. Dear gods! Is this Hathrin food? He asked himself. He had no money, and this was the only food he had. He had to eat the Hathrin food. 30 seconds later his mouth was ejecting the Hathrin food out the window. The UN-mentionable fluid landed in the water below. He emptied the rest of the contents of the food pouch into the water. He rinsed his mouth out with water from a small barrel in the corner of the room. Now that he'd recovered, he decided to have a proper look around the village. He exited the flat and went out the front door. He walked out onto the street. It was still raining. He looked around. The culture was certainly different to Trubru village. Miniature stores were lined up along the wooden road, selling fruit, supplies, antiques, etc. Leaned against the wall of a small structure was an art cellar. Croesus walked up to him and examined his portraits. There was a rendering of a translucent cube in a multicolored sphere, a bowl of trees, a collapsed house, and many others. You buying? He asked the seller. No thanks, said Croesus. He continued down the street. He passed a black-haired woman with a hat full of money, playing a flute. It was 10:31 p.m., and Croesus back in the flat getting ready for bed. He switched off the gas lamp and lay on top of the covers. Eliho was lying in the corner. He dropped off easily. Morning came. He got out of bed and looked out the window. It was still stormy. He opened his food pouch. He had filled it the previous night with side snacks he had borrowed from the pub. Inside the pouch was various nuts, olives, and a Neum apple. It wasn't the best breakfast he had, but it was better than Hathrin food. He ingested half of the content and saved the rest for his journey to the summit of Mount Tholine. But before he packed to leave for the mountain, he would need a weapon to face the so-called Opollon. But he needed money. He needed to sell some things. He couldn't possibly sell the icon. He rummaged through his bag for valuables. He found a metal necklace that he found in the forest, a tan stone disc, a clay tile that he made, and for some reason, a small container of ink. Why did I pack that? He wondered aloud. 20 minutes later, he was leaning against the wall on the street with a tea towel laid out on the ground with his artifacts. An elderly woman came up to him. "How much for the tile?" she asked. 5 minnows, said Croesus. The woman paid him and walked off with the tile. 4 minutes later, a long-haired teenager purchased the necklace for 8 minnows. They're actually buying this stuff, he thought. 7 minutes later, a bearded man examined his container of ink. "I'll be back in a minute," he said as he walked off. Not long after that, he returned with a taller man. "This is real ink?" he asked the taller man. Croesus nodded. "How much?" Croesus thought for a second. By the way he's talking, ink seems really valuable here. I'll probably need a lot of money to buy a sword. I mean, how much does a sword cost nowadays? 50 minnows, he said. The tall man paid Croesus and left with a container of ink. This should be enough, he thought. He wrapped up the rest of the artifacts and left for the antique store. He opened the door. The shelves on the walls were filled with odd knickknacks. The only people there were the shopkeeper and a man examining a glass sphere. Croesus picked up a jewel-encrusted sword and placed it on the counter. 60 minnows, said the shopkeeper. That's all? He exclaimed as he paid the shopkeeper. Croesus stood on Phylon Beach in the middle of the night. It was quite cold. The waves were lapping violently against the shore. The wind was blowing his hair to one side. He had the sword in his right hand. Mount Tholine towered in front of him. He slowly paced towards it. But on his way he had the shock of his life. When he came to Hydralis the previous day, he was told about the Opollon. But he wasn't sure if he believed it. But now he was seeing it with his own irises. 6 scrawny legs scuttled along the sand. 2 huge claws carried by meaty arms were attached to its squat body, protected by a red-brown shell. Croesus tried to go around it. Maybe it would ignore him if he did that. But it didn't. It would not let Croesus pass. "All right, it's time you stopped terrorizing Hydralis," he said under his breath. Croesus ran at the Opollon with his sword. The beast swung his claw at him. Croesus ducked and avoided its attack. He struck its arm with the sword. The Opollon tried to crush him with his other claw. Croesus rolled to one side and grabbed onto the claw. "This is a mistake. This is a mistake. This is a mistake." The Opollon shook its claw around in the air with Croesus on it. He was hanging on for dear life. Then, the beast decided it would eat him. It slowly moved its claw towards its mouth. "Oh gods, this is bad." He thought, if I stay on the claw, I get munched. If I jump off, it'll crush me. He still had the sword in his hand. He had an idea. He was right in front of the Opollon's face. This was his chance. He pierced the beast's throat with the sword. The Opollon dropped him. Croesus landed on his back on the sand. He watched as the beast collapsed. Blood ran from its neck. He examined the wound. He noticed a bit of shiny grey. It was a stone. He pulled it out of the Opollon's throat, trying not to get his hands covered in crab innards. It was a stone icon. He compared it to the icon he'd found a couple of days ago. They matched. The only difference was the symbol. He put the new icon in his bag and headed back to Hydralis. The city was celebrating as the ruthless creature that had harassed it for years had been defeated. Croesus was being passed down a crowd in the town square. The mayor greeted him and awarded him with a golden object. It was in the shape of a crude key, the size of an ouzel rabbit, 21 centimeters tall. "What's this?" he asked Croesus. "It is called the talisman," said the mayor. "It is known to house the souls of all the past warriors of the city." "Oh, cheers." The mayor left. Just then, a familiar man walked up to Croesus. It was the shopkeeper of the antique store he'd met yesterday. "How much for the sword?" he whispered in Croesus' ear. "Why do you want this?" "It's covered in blood." "I bet any collector would want the sword that defeated the Opalon." Croesus thought. He could probably use the money in the future. 80 minnows, he said. The man purchased the sword and headed back to his store. Croesus then went back to the flat. When he got there, he fed Liho and packed his things. He was now ready to leave for Mount Tholine. But first he needed to find Geotac. He found Geotac on the street, purchasing some fruit from a miniature store. It's you here," he said. "Hi, I'm finished with your flat," said Croesus. "I fed Liho." "Okay, she didn't bite you or anything?" "No, not at all. She just crawled around, minding her own business. I'm off to Mount Tholine now. Thanks for your troubles," he said as he gave Geotac 10 minnows. "I can't accept this." "It's okay, I've got a lot of money now." Geotac accepted the money. "Well, see you," said Croesus. By the way, don't eat Hathran food. It looks nice, but it's not." "Hey, do you think I could come with you?" "To the mountain?" "Okay, but why?" "Well, Thai's going on holiday to Tyleki and I've got nothing else to do this week." "All right, but you'll have to bring your own supplies." "Oh, that's okay. All I need is food and I've just bought some right now." "What about entertainment?" Never mind that." "So, are we going?" "Sure, I just need to get some things." They shopped for a few supplies and then left for Mount Tholine. Croesus and Geotac were sitting around a campfire on the mountain at 9:30 p.m. Above the fire, on a stick, was a netting full of Keelio meat. Behind them were 2 tents. The night was cold and full of stars. "I call the left leg," said Geotac, looking at the meat. Croesus remained silent. "Are you okay?" he asked Geotac. "Yeah, sorry. It's just, I was asked to find Zychius by the local shaman of my village because of these." Croesus fished out the 2 stone icons out of his bag. Geotac's eyes widened. "Where did you find those?" he asked. "This one fell from the sky, and this one was in the Opalon's throat." Seems pretty serious." The conversation continued. First on the icons, then onto Croesus' home, then onto musical instruments, such as the Elysian flute, then for some reason, the taste of soap. Then the taste of Hathran food, as Croesus was already familiar with. "Speaking of that, who's looking after Liho?" he asked Croesus. "Oh, I've got one of the man who works at the bar to look after her. He loves animals." "Seriously?" "He seemed a bit mad when I met him." "Yeah, he's a bit eccentric." 1 hour later, they were both asleep in their tents. Croesus was floating in darkness. He looked down at his body. He was naked. He felt his scar under his eye. It was gone. He heard overlapping voices. Beware the cult that stands for nothing but racism and tyranny. The last secret of our Creator lies within the center. The man with fire in his eyes, ice in his heart, and blood on his hands approaches. You will surrender your life to me, Croesus, son of Charheath. He woke up startled. What the? He said as he went back to sleep. Morning came. Croesus walked out of his tent. Geotac was reading a book entitled A Mojo. The weather was sunny. No clouds were to be seen. The view from where he was standing was astounding. To the left was a huge forest next to Phelan Beach, then the grassland, then the Throp Forest. On the far side of the Throp Forest was a tiny speck, which he assumed was Trubru village. On the right was a seemingly endless sea. In the distance was a small island. You sleep well? He asked Geotac. Yeah, I had this really weird dream. Millimeter, I heard you tossing in your sleep. What happened in the dream? I can't really remember. Something about a cult and a secret or something. Never mind. Dreams don't mean anything. Anyway, shall we continue up the mountain? They packed their things and carried on up the mountain. 1 hour later they paused for a break, for the 11th time. Oh, gods! Who would willingly live up here? Said Croesus. Nice view though, said Geotac. Enox didn't even say where on the mountain Zacchaeus is. I'm sure we'll find something soon. They continued on. 15 minutes later, they came to a wooden hut. They walked up to the door. I think I should wait outside, said Geotac. Croesus knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. He heard a voice. All right. All right. I'm coming. An old man poked his eye through a peephole in the door. Hi, my name's Croesus. I've come miles in search of. Get to the point, said the old man. I've got 2 weird rocks and my local shaman told me to find you, said Croesus quickly. Okay, come in, said the old man as he opened the door, revealing himself. He was a short, bald man with a long grey beard. He wore a purple robe and was carrying a tall wooden stick. His body was old, but his eyes were older. Croesus walked in. Geotac remained outside. The interior of the hut was a spherical room with nothing but a couple of shelves containing a few books, a stove in the center of the room, and a bucket of water in the corner. The old man sat on the floor in a random position. Come on, sit down, he said. You are Zacchaeus, right? He asked Croesus. Of course. Who else would live up here? Suppose you're right, said Croesus as he sat opposite Zacchaeus. So, where are you from? I live in a small village in the trees in the Throp Forest. And why were you sent here? Croesus fished out the 2 stone icons out of his bag. A few days ago I woke up one night and this thing fell from the sky. He showed him the one in his left hand, then this one was in the Opolin's throat. You're the kid who defeated the Opolin. Yes, I observed it through my telescope. Zacchaeus held up a left flower. Yeah, you know that's not a telescope, don't you? So you say. To say a lair can't be a telescope could be considered closed-minded. Yep, this man's completely bollocks. Thought Croesus, I hope he knows what he's doing. Okay, let me see this, said Zacchaeus as he picked up one of the icons. He stood up and started pacing around whilst examining it. Croesus watched him. Zacchaeus' eyes widened. This is. They heard a knock at the door. Come in, he said. Geotac walked in. Sorry, I was getting a bit bored out there. Can I join you? He said. Sure. Sit down, said Zacchaeus anyway. These are called psychostones. There are 3 of these scattered across the continent. You already have 2. You must find the 3rd one and deliver it to an underground temple beyond the Umhanners. Why? He asked Croesus. Because the fate of the world depends on it. When the first psychostone fell from the sky, that was a sign that something is coming out of its prison. What's that then? Icamus, the god of destruction. He is slowly clawing his way out of his abstract prison and will eventually, do his stuff. Only by inserting the psychostones into their slots will Icamus be sealed for good. Okay, I think we should leave the government to deal with this. No, it has to be you. You found the first stone. Now it has chosen you to find its brothers. All right, I've always wanted to go on a quest like this. Do you know where the 3rd stone is? You'll know when it's near. Now, you're going to need directions to the temple after you find the stone. Do you have a map? Yeah, hang on, said Croesus as he got his map out of his bag. Zacchaeus dipped his finger in a pot of ink and drew a line on the map from their current position to the location of the temple. Okay, thank you for your help, said Croesus as he refilled his hip flask and prepared to leave with geotack. That'll be 90 minnows, please, said Zacchaeus. Croesus paused. You serious? He asked. Only joking. Yeah, thanks, said Croesus as he and Geotack left the hut. What a character, said Geotack. At least he's not grumpy. I was expecting him to be grumpy, said Croesus. Anyway, according to the map, the Umhanners are further north. Between here and there is a desert called the Harki Desert. Okay, said Geotack. Let's continue on. They carried on north. They combated boredom via conversation. So, what did you think of him? Asked Geotack. I think he might be a bit mad. Well, very mad. The journey down was uneventful. They reached the bottom. They were now between the Mount Tholine and its twin. The weather was surprisingly cloudy here with very slight rain. It was a grassy area with many odd-looking trees. They saw a wooden sign that indicated the area as Garker Pass. It's not really a pass, is it? It's more of a valley, said Croesus. So you say, said a suave voice. A teenaged boy with shoulder-length grey hair jumped down from a tree. He was slightly taller than Croesus. He had a bow slung across his back with 3 arrows hanging from his belt. He was wearing a brown leather waistcoat. His left forearm was covered by a long wristband. His irises were a light cyan color contained in narrow eyes. How long have you been there? Exclaimed Croesus. My name is Zeke. I like here. Who are you? Croesus and Geotack introduced themselves. How long have you lived out here? Asked Geotack, concerned. Years. I originally came from a small village miles from here. I lived with my aunt and uncle. I never knew my parents. But it was attacked by raiders. I don't know what's happened to my family. I haven't seen them since that day, said Zeke. But how do you survive here? I see no foreigner. The green from the robular trees is nutritious enough. Yeah, but where do you sleep? The robular trees. What do you drink? Dew. So, you've taught yourself to survive like this? Asked Croesus. No, my uncle taught me. Are you going through the pass? Yeah. We were told to keep going north, said Croesus. Zeke narrowed his eyes more so. This pass can be surprisingly dangerous. I know it better than anyone. I shall guide you. Okay, said Geotac. After 2 minutes of further tete-a-tete, Zeke led Crochus and Geotac through the pass. This kid seems to be hiding something, thought Crochus. So, why is your hair grey anyway? He asked. I was born with it, replied Zeke. Man, this guy's quiet, exclaimed Crochus in his mind. He and Geotac attempted to establish conversation many times. All were quickly finished by Zeke. He was clearly a person of few words. The following hour was mainly walking in silence, and thus lasted long. They finally came to an opening. Directly ahead was the Harki Desert. There is a small settlement not far from here. I will take you there. They will lead you to wherever you're going, said Zeke. 20 minutes later, the three of them were walking through a sea of sand. The weather was mercilessly hot. The ground was hot, the air was hot, everything was hot. There was nothing but sand and sky in every direction. The sand was soft and would have been more comfortable if it weren't so hot. The air felt as if it was crushing them. Why must the ground sizzle like this? Grumbled Crochus. Maybe you should wear sandals next time you come to a desert, said Geotac. Crochus put his hip flask to his forehead. It was unpleasantly warm. Oh, prack. How much longer? He said, desperately. About half an hour, said Zeke. 33 minutes later, they could see a tiny hamlet in the distance. They continued towards it. As it came closer into view, it was revealed to be surrounded by a stone fence with a wooden gate. When they got there, Zeke knocked at the gate. A pair of eyes appeared at the peephole. Who is it? He asked. LOC Bird. And 2 guests, said Zeke. The gate opened. The man at the peephole was nowhere to be seen. Crochus looked around the area. It was basically 6 small stone structures circled around a campfire. Many people were locked in their own tasks. Zeke led Crochus and Geotac into a hut in the corner. The interior of the hut seemed comfortable. On one side of the room was a bearded man sitting at a desk with many sheets of parchment sprawled across it. On the wall behind the man was a map of the world. Zeke, how are you, boy? Said the bearded man. I bring 2 guests, said Zeke. Ages? 14 and 31. The bearded man looked at Crochus. Skinny, not necessarily tall. He looked at Geotac. Tall, nowhere near muscular. Where do you 2 come from? I'm from the Throp Forest. He's from Hydralis, said Crochus. Well, you both seem fit for an assignment. What? Exclaimed Geotac. We're not staying. We just need you to take us north. If you want us to do you a favor, you must do us a favor first, said the bearded man. We're sort of in a hurry though, said Crochus. Oh, this won't take long. All we need is a salt sample from the West Section Desert. Salt? Why salt? Asked Geotac. Salt is actually a good source for tracking. Not many people know that, but this agency has to use every trick in the book in these situations. What does your agency actually do? Asked Crochus. That's classified, said the bearded man. All right, we'll get some salt for you. But after that, you're going to take us to the Omhanners. Agreed. By the way, my name's Hackler. My daughter will take you to the nearest place to find salt. I'll just get her. The bearded man walked out of the office. 1 minute later he returned. With him was a teenaged girl. She was about Crochus' age, if not slightly younger. She had long navy blue hair and dark brown eyes. Crochus' eyes widened. My name's Takri. I'll be guiding you, she sighed. Side B. 1 hour later, Crochus, Geotack and Takri were climbing onto their steeds and ready to leave to collect the salt. They were wearing protection goggles. The steeds were creatures called clacterfoots. They were 6 feet tall olive-green birds. Their beaks were orange like the inside of a mango. They were thin and pointed down. 3 long toes pointed out of 2 spindly legs. Their eyes seemed unresponsive. They let off a low caw when they were mounted. The bird's back felt soft. Takri gave Crochus and Geotack instructions on how to control the clacterfoot. All right, follow me, she said after the lesson. Her steed sped off into the distance, leaving a cloud of dust. Crochus tickled his steed's neck as he was told. He was speeding through the desert. He looked behind him. Geotack was close behind. At many times he was paranoid about falling off, but it was harder than he expected. He felt excited. This was fun, if not a little dangerous. He was glad he had goggles. He and Geotack caught up with Takri. 15 minutes later they arrived at a small hill. Crochus gently tugged the reins on his steed. His clacterfoot stopped immediately, causing him to lurch forward. He toppled to the right and fell off his steed. He opened his eyes. Takri was standing over him, smiling. That was not funny, said Crochus, who got up and dusted himself. Are you okay? She asked. Nah, I'm always fine, said Crochus, trying to be cool. Whatever, said Takri as she led them over to the hill. The ground on the hill was full of cracks. The cracks acted as vats containing large portions of salt. They pulled out spades from the bags and started digging. After 2 minutes they had a small pouch of salt ready. They mounted their steeds and set off back to the settlement. The 3 of them were standing outside Hackler's office. Well done, you 3, said Hackler. Now what did you say about a lift? Oh, we'd like you to take us the Umhanners, said Crochus. I'll take them, said Takri. All right, said Hackler. There is a village near the edge of the desert that could provide a guide to the Umhanna range. Later that evening, Crochus, Geotack, and Takri were sitting around a campfire in the middle of the desert. The sky was encrusted in stars. It was cold out here, so they were all huddled up in robes to keep warm. Geotack had long since fallen asleep. They were having a lively conversation. So, why are you 2 headed to the Umhanners? Asked Takri. We're searching for a stone icon that's apparently near the Umhanners, said Crochus. Takri looked puzzled. What for? She asked. Crochus wasn't sure he should be saying this, but he felt comfortable around her. He showed her the 2 psychostones. He explained their origin and his mission. Normally I'd think you're mental, but you seem so sure of this. Why else would a grown man join you? She said, referring to Geotack, who was snoring loudly. I assure you I'm not mental, laughed Crochus. So, what's your story? Asked Takri, leaning back. Not much to say, really. I never knew my parents. My grandfather was my parent for as long as I remember. But when I was about 7, he went out one night and never came back. I'd give anything to know what's happened to him, said Crochus, fighting back tears. I'm sorry to hear that, said Takri, putting her hand on his forearm. They continued talking. 2 days of traveling later, they could see a large ridge in the distance. 3 minutes later they were at the top of the huge hill. In front of them was a large pile of sticks. It was at least 7 feet tall. What's this for? Asked Crochus. Not sure. I've never been this far, said Takri. Suddenly, the pile of sticks started to spread out, making it shorter. From the center came a pair of orange gold wings. The sticks were blown away in every direction, revealing a huge bird. It looked like a cross between a chicken and an eagle. It had a long crimson beak, 3 feathers sticking out of the top of its head, and golden tail feathers. Its color scheme was a fiery red with a burning orange with a shining gold. "What is that?" he exclaimed Geotac. "It's a phoenix," he said Takri. "There's no such thing. I've seen rocks fall from the sky, a huge crab monster, and an old man tell me about the god of destruction. I'd believe anything now," said Crochus. The phoenix let off a low caw. It looked weary. "They say it's getting old." "It's lived for a very long time," said Takri. "What, so it's going to die, then come back to life?" he asked Geotac. "Soon. I'm going to ask it to give us a lift." She put her hand on the phoenix's forehead and spoke in a language Crochus was not familiar with. "Shahasi-tai, Sihas his they." The phoenix looked in Crochus, then to Geotac. Takri instructed them to put their right hands across their chest. They did this. The phoenix turned around and lowered its back. "After you," said Geotac to Crochus. He climbed onto the phoenix's back. It felt similar to a clactofoot but more bony. The surface was soft and warm. The large bird took off immediately before Geotac and Takri could get on. Crochus tried to make it turn round, but it wouldn't. He looked behind him. They were far off the ground. He looked around. Below him was the desert. On his left was the ocean in the distance. Crochus wasn't scared of heights, but he was scared of falling off. He was holding the phoenix's neck for dear life. He had never felt so alive or afraid. In just a few minutes they passed the desert and were now flying over a mountain range. This must have been the Umhanners. They circled this area for a seemingly long time, until they finally started to descend really fast. He was nearly blown off the birds back by the gusts of wind. This continued for at least a minute. At last they landed. The bird perched on a stone pathway on one of the mountains. Crochus descended from the bird. Thanks," he said, "but you left my friends behind. You don't mind going back for them, do you?" But the phoenix looked tired. It collapsed. Crochus kneeled beside it. "Leave it," he said, a deep voice behind him. He turned around to see a tall, bald man wearing a light yellow robe. "Who are you?" he asked Crochus. "Brother Marcellus of Akitsum," said the man. He showed him a marking on his left hand. "What is your name?" he asked. Crochus introduced himself. "What's wrong with the phoenix?" he asked. "He is near the end of his life. In its final moments it encases itself in mere twigs and then ignites. After a few hours it enters a new incarnation. It is best to leave it to its own devices now. So, what are you doing up here?" "I come from a brotherhood of monks located at the top of the mountain." "Why are you here?" Crochus thought these monks might be able to help him find the third psychostone. He told Marcellus of his mission. "I'm not aware of these objects," said Marcellus, "but I know someone who might know something about it." "Follow." Crochus followed the monk. The mountain path was made of brown stone blocks. The weather was clear, but a storm cloud was heading their way. He thought of Takri and Geotac. He wondered what they were doing. Half an hour later they came to an archway that led to a tunnel cut into the mountain. On the right of the archway was another monk. He was slightly shorter than Marcellus. He also had a marking on his hand, but different. "Welcome back, Brother Marcellus," he said. "Thank you, Brother Phoenix." "I bring a guest," said Marcellus. Phoenix looked at Croesus. He introduced himself. After a brief inconsequential conversation, he and Marcellus walked into the archway. The tunnel was dark. 30 seconds later they arrived at an opening. It resembled a large arcade cut into the mountain. Many monks were walking around in their own way. Some were meditating, others were chatting. The walls were a tan-brown stone. Torches were lined around the walls to provide the cave with light. The temperature was pleasantly warm. On the ceiling was a carved design of a four-armed creature. "This is our monastery," said Marcellus. "I will now take you to our leader." He led Croesus to a stone door. He opened it. It led to a small pathway. At the end was nothing but another monk, meditating on top of a stone table. "Greetings, Brother Marcellus, and guest," he said as he slowly opened his eyes. His voice was high-pitched and calm. He climbed off and behind the table. "Come forwards, stranger," he said to Croesus. Croesus walked up to him so that stone table was between them. "My name is Nom," said the monk. "Please tell me of your origins." Croesus told him of his home in Trubru village, the night the Psyche stone fell from the sky, his journey to Mount Tholine, his trek across the desert, and his mission to find what he was looking for. "I know of the Psyche stones," said Nom. "Whatever Zychius told you, you must not listen. Collecting the 3 Psyche stones will not reveal Icamus. They will awaken him." "You mean my whole quest has been in vain?" he asked Croesus. "No, you must still find the 3rd Psyche stone, but you will not deliver to the temple. You must throw them all in the ocean. They will not be safe with us. Somebody might find out." "Nobody will find them in the ocean." "Okay, do you know where the 3rd stone is?" "You'll know when it is near. It is located in a forest north of the Omhana range known as the Bolan Trees. We will take you there in a few days." 4 days passed at the monastery. This was enough time for Croesus to take a rest. He had traveled so far, met so many people. He wondered what Geotac was doing. He thought of Thai, the bartender at Hydralis, Zeke, Hackler, Ingerx, then Takri. He wondered if he'd see her again. He only met her a few days ago, but he had taken a shine to her. Traveling this far, he had realized how attractive this continent was. His grandfather used to tell him seeing is believing. He was still wondering what had happened to his grandfather. He was the only parent he knew. From what he remembered, he was a cheerful individual, full of life. It was hard to believe he was in his 70s. The night he disappeared, Croesus was so worried. His friend, Hegener, took care of him until he was 12. Croesus had had his rest. It was time to depart to the so-called Bolan Trees. He was taken onto a steed with 3 monks, 1 guide and 2 guards. Before they left, Nom spoke to Croesus. "I hope you are successful. This could very well save the world," he said. "Thank you for the hospitality," said Croesus. He mounted his steed and left. He heard Nom shout after him, "Your grandfather is not dead." Croesus's eyes widened. A field of shock came over him as if he had just been struck by lightning. This was the most important thing to him he had heard in years. He tried to make the guide turn round, but it wasn't allowed. He wouldn't take this. He jumped off the steed and ran back to the monastery. Memories of his grandfather rang through his head. This was it. He was going to see him again. He ran back to confront Nom and ask him where his grandfather was. But when he got there, the monk was nowhere to be seen. A tear ran down his cheek. The steed caught up with him. "You will see him again," said the guide. "Trust me." Croesus hoped to the gods they knew what they were doing. He remounted the steed and they continued to the Bolan trees. 3 days later he was alone in the forest. He had supplies stored in his bag. He had been walking for some time now. Maybe 3 hours. It was night time. The forest was lit by fireflies. The night was warm. The sky was full of stars. He was searching for the third Psyker stone. It was such a small object in such a big forest. But he was told he would know when it's near. After another hour of aimless searching, he came to an opening. He could properly see the sky now. The grass was soft and rubbery. Ahead of him was a cliff. Sitting on the edge of the cliff was none other than Takri. Crochus called her. She turned around to face him. He went over to join her. The cliff overlooked the whole forest. In the distance was the sea, represented by a thick ink-colored line. "How did you get here?" he asked Crochus. "I travelled through the Umhanners. I thought you'd be here. What's happened to Geotac?" "He's gone home." "Why didn't you go back to the settlement?" "I wanted to help you." "Thanks." The conversation continued for 10 minutes. "So, how are we supposed to find this stone in this big place?" "Zychius said I'd know when it's near." "That's it?" "Apparently." There was an awkward pause. "Thanks for helping," said Crochus finally. They turned to face each other. They both leaned forwards. He closed his eyes, but then a screeching noise was heard. He opened his eyes. He was annoyed to see Takri was looking ahead. "What?" he muttered. He turned to where Takri was looking. A beacon of light was seen in the distance. "That's it. It must be," he said. They headed to the beacon. 20 minutes later Crochus was holding the third Psyker stone in his hands. Suddenly, a tower of white light appeared in the distance. "That must be where we should take them," said Takri. "No," said Crochus. "I was told by the Brotherhood of Akatsim to dispose of them in the ocean." A familiar voice came from behind them. "Do not listen to them, Crochus." It was Zychius. "The monks of Akatsim have no means of protecting the world," he said. "Their ancestors were followers of Icamus. One man sealed him in his prison. The Brotherhood today is bent on reawakening him. Trust me, you must deliver the Psyker stones to the temple." His eyes were truthful. Crochus couldn't help but believe him. Zychius led Crochus and Takri to the Tower of Light. 10 minutes later they came to a cave. They entered. It was cold in here. It wasn't dark at all. Crochus wondered why. Then he saw that a group of fireflies was flying above them, lighting their path. The tunnels twisted and turned. The only sound was footsteps and water dripping from the stalactites. They kept walking for what seemed like forever, until finally they came to a lake with a stone bridge that connected them to the other end. On the other end of the lake was an artificial hall. It was exactly the same as the hall in Crochus's vision more than a week ago. This was the temple. This was where they could reseal Icamus for good. They travelled across the bridge. He had finally come to the place he had been trying to get to for more than a week. The carvings were the same. The texture on the pillars was the same. Ahead was the pillar with the 3 slots. This was it. Crochus prepared to put the first Psyker stone in its slot, when suddenly he felt a sharp object poking his back. A voice spoke behind him. "Thank you for your cooperation, Zychius," it said. "Now put the stones into the slots or die." Crochus, it was Geotac. "Geotac? What are you doing?" said Takri. Geotac clicked his fingers and Zychius shook his head as if he had woke up from a nightmare. "What's happened? How did I get here?" he asked, confused. "What have you done to him?" demanded Croesus. I told you I learned the art of hypnotism, said Geotac. Did you really think you could have defeated the Opalin if you hadn't had any help? I let the beast go easy on you. What are you talking about? He asked Croesus. I hypnotized the Opalin into obeying me years before you came to Hydralis. Then I climbed Mount Tholine and did the same to Zycius. Why? Because I knew one day the one with the first Psyker stone would pass Neo Bay. The 3 stones are scattered across the continent very secretly. The first, hidden among the stars. The second, hidden in the Opalin's throat. The third, hidden in the middle of nowhere. I found an ancient shrine tucked away in some forest that could trigger the release of the first stone. I knew it would land near Trubru village, so some nobody would go looking for Zycius for answers. Normally he would have said to dispose of them, but with my tweaks he told you to look for the other 2-inch. The Brotherhood was right. Yes, putting the stones into their slots triggers the release of Icamus. But Icamus is only to be released at the end of days. Why now? He asked Zycius. Imagine what a weapon that would be. The ability to release the god of destruction at will. Geotac's eyes were wild. He then moved to Takri and held a dagger to her throat. It was surprising how quickly he moved. They barely had time to blink. Now put the stones into the slots or I'll slit her throat, he said. Don't do it, said Takri. Croesus couldn't risk it. He inserted the 3 Psyker stones into their personal slots. The ground vibrated, the walls creaked, ethereal singing was heard from nowhere. They all turned around to the ground in the center of the hall was yawning open. A vertical shaft of blue light emitted from the small chasm. An object rose from the shaft and reached head level. It was a dark blue translucent cube the size of a coconut. Evil chuckling was heard from Geotac. Thank you for your help, you 3. Give my thanks to Hackler, Zeke, and Thai, he said, and your grandfather, Croesus. You what? Said Croesus. What have you done with my grandfather? A bolt of anger went through his body. You want him? Asked Geotac. You'd better come and get him then. Suddenly gusts of wind circled him. Croesus, Takri, and Zycius shielded their eyes. When the wind stopped, Geotac was gone. Witchcraft, said Zycius. What was that cube thing? Asked Takri. That was Icamus' prison. But you said his prison was abstract, said Croesus. I was hypnotized. Most things I told you were lies. When Geotac opens that cube, Icamus will be released into the world once again. Again? 700 years ago Icamus was released, but the ancestors of the Brotherhood of Akatsim resealed him. Now they are devoted to protecting him. But what is Geotac doing with my grandfather? Since he knew somebody from Trubru village was destined to find the first stone, he kidnapped a resident and is using him as bait. Croesus felt many emotions: bravery, anger, confidence, or an odd combination. I haven't seen him for 6 years, but no more. We're going to stop Geotac from releasing the god of destruction, and I'm finally going to see my grandfather again. Do you know where he's going to open the cube? Yes, the Tower of Faxus. That is where the ritual is to be held. I will take you there. A day passed and Croesus, Takri, and Zycius were walking through the forest on the way to the Tower of Faxus. Croesus was still suspicious about Zycius. What if it was a trick? What if he was still under Geotac's control? He was paranoid that they would not arrive in time to stop the awakening, and paradoxically, he was excited about reuniting with his grandfather. The weather was clear. The day was nearing dusk. 1 hour later, they were standing at the door of a gigantic metal tower. The door was huge and wooden. The material on the tower was cream-colored and smooth. The tower itself was the highest thing Croesus had seen in his life. The top was barely visible. Zacchaeus opened the door easily. The interior was one large circular room, with nothing but a spiral staircase snaking up the wall. They looked up. The ceiling was an impossibly long way from where they were. "We're going up there?" he asked Takri. "You're scared of heights?" he asked Croesus. "I lived in the desert. I know nothing of heights, so this will be a new experience for me." They proceeded up the spiral staircase. They walked for what seemed like forever. Croesus started to think, what if it had been someone else who found the first stone? He or she might have sold it. Or maybe it would have been someone better to deal with this matter. And what if Icamus was going to be released? Hopefully he had not been yet. He hoped they still had time to stop Geotac. They reached the top of the staircase. They walked through a doorway that led outside. All they could see was the metal floor and an amber sky. They looked to the left. Standing on the edge was Geotac with an old man. He had long grey hair in dreadlocks, dark brown eyes, and tan skin. Croesus recognized him immediately. It was his grandfather. He hadn't seen him since he was 8. A crack of joy spread through his chest. He had not felt like this for a long time. His grandfather smiled at him. "You have been very useful to me over the years, Nico," said Geotac, "but I no longer need you." He pierced Croesus' grandfather's chest from behind with a dagger. He fell to the ground. Croesus' felling of joy was severed. Every muscle in his body except his legs went limp. He ran over to his dying relative and kneeled beside him. Geotac was standing over them. "Grandad, no, please don't die," he pleaded. "Croesus, my boy," said Nico, "it's good to see you again. I've come all this way. I'll get a paramedic." Nico held Croesus' hand. "This is our last moment together ever. Don't waste it trying to find help. We're in the middle of nowhere anyway," he said. "I never forgot your sense of humor," said Croesus. He then asked a question he had always wanted to ask him. "What were my parents like?" Your mother, Shahid, was a cheerful woman. Kind and smart. She had long babe hair and blue eyes. Now when she met your dad, Simitak, I wasn't sure about him. He was a reckless lad. I remember him balancing on the side of a bridge for a dare when he was young. But then he matured. Got fatter as well." Croesus giggled. "I've waited for you for years," he said. "You were my first thought every morning. You're old enough to take care of yourself now. You have your friends," said Nico, looking at Takri, and Zacchaeus is seeing is believing. He rested his head and closed his eyes. He stopped breathing. Croesus attempted to feel his heartbeat, but there was nothing. His grandfather was dead. Anguish teared through his body. He screamed and wept into Nico's chest. Then a bolt of rage went through him. He got up and pushed Geotac over the edge of the tower, but quickly gripped his hand and stopped him from falling. It was a long way down, and he would gladly throw Geotac down there. "Give me one reason not to drop you," Croesus said gently. "One reason? That's easy. You don't have the right heart." Croesus weakened his grip. "I'd do it. Don't think I won't." A look of fear spread Geotac's face. "Croesus, no." Takri's hand was on his right arm. Don't kill him." Croesus closed his eyes for 10 seconds and calmed down. They both pulled Geotac back onto the tower. He snatched the cube out of his hand. "I'm taking this back to the temple," he said. "Never come into my life again." Before they could leave, Geotac grabbed Crochus by the throat. "I'm afraid I can't give up the cube," he said softly. He took the cube and held it above his head and chanted in ancient language. "Hasitho Icamus Leron Toi." Suddenly cobwebs of purple lightning spread out from the cube. The tower began to crack. The section of the floor that Geotac was standing on broke, separated, and slid off the building. He went with the section and plunged down into the forest far below. Trubru Village. The village was in ruins. Large purple fork lightning was striking the village from an unknown force. Middle-aged man Gromtak was rushed into Enox's hut. "Can't you hear? The village is under attack," he said. "Not just the village," said Enox, "it's the whole world." Hydralis. Thai, who had recently returned from a holiday, was fighting for survival along with all the other citizens. "I leave for a week and this happens," he said to a man and woman next to him. The city was nearly completely flooded. Buildings were sporting big holes caused by the purple lightning. He wondered where Geotac was. In Garcarparis, Zeke was safe between the two mountains, but he knew he couldn't just protect himself. He would soon set off to Hydralis and lead them back to his home for refuge. The settlement in the Harki Desert was experiencing sandstorms. Local employee Warley was on her clacterfoot in the middle of a storm. After 5 minutes, she finally struggled back into the settlement. She followed the others into Hackler's office. They were told it would be safer in there. The Akatsim monastery was falling apart. Nom merely stood as everything crumbled around him. He wasn't worried. He knew there were people who could stop this. This was a life-or-death matter. All he could do is stand and wait. Should Icamus be resealed, the world would be safe. But if not, Mystiker was doomed. Crochus, Takri, and Zychius were standing on top of the tower of Faxus. Ahead of them was a four-armed, dark purple creature. It had no legs. It seemed to be floating. Its face was indescribable. It had burning crimson eyes, 6 mandibles around its mouth, and on its forehead were 3 spikes like a trident. Its torso and arms were muscular. It had a system of floating islands orbiting its stomach. Every few minutes it would let out a titanic roar. The sky was shrouded in purple shading. "It has happened," said Zychius. "He has been released." "You mean that thing is Icamus?" said Crochus. Before they could say any more, one of the floating islands collided with the tower. He had an idea. He picked up the empty cube and jumped onto the island. He was on an island only 3 meters wide, hundreds of feet off the ground and circling the god of destruction. More than a week ago, he was simply doing his chores in Trubru village. This was such a rush. Only 10 minutes ago he was mourning the death of his grandfather. He held the cube up to Icamus and chanted the Raziel code. Nothing happened. Icamus had to be weakened. Crochus looked up. Icamus' large hand was coming down on him. He quickly leaped off the island and onto the one closest to him. He frantically searched through his bag for something that could help. His and everyone else's life was at stake. Then he found it, the talisman. The large key-like object he had been given after he defeated the Opalon. He was told it housed the souls of the past warriors of Hydralis. Maybe they could help him now? He held the talisman above his head and closed his eyes. "Help me, help me, help me," he repeated in his head. He felt a surge of power through his body. He felt the strength of 1,000 warriors, and the buzz of 1,000 thoughts all trained on weakening Icamus. He felt light. He opened his eyes. His skin was a cyan color accompanied by lime-green electricity. He was hovering just above the small island. He still had the talisman and the cube in his hands. He flew up to Icamus' face at lightning speed. He placed his hand on the god's large forehead. He inflicted pain on it. He spread the green electricity across his body. Icamus let out a pained howl. This was Croesus' only chance. He held the cube up to the evil god's face and chanted the Raziel code. He was surprised to see the huge body in front of him get sucked into such a small thing. The purple lightning melted away, the sky reverted to average dusk, and the floating islands started to fall to the ground. But then Croesus felt tired, impossibly tired. The ancient warriors had done their job, now they were returning to their dwelling. His skin went back to its normal color, and the strength faded away. This meant he couldn't fly anymore. He fell. This was it. He had saved the world and now he was going to die. He still had the cube and the talisman in his hands. But after all that had happened, he didn't mind dying. He had had a life-changing journey, met many new people, reunited with his grandfather, only find him dead. There was nothing left to do. He closed his eyes as he plummeted. But then he thought more. He still had a lot more to look forward to. Being an adult, praise for saving the world, and Takri. He then decided he didn't want to die. He opened his eyes. He was near the ground. But then he hit a soft surface. This surface felt familiar. It was the Phoenix. They were flying around the Tower of Phaxus. "Thanks," said Croesus. "Could you pick up my friends this time?" 2 minutes later, Takri and Zychius were also on the Phoenix's back. "So, what's going to happen now?" he asked Croesus. "You must return the cube and the Psyker stones to their hiding places," said Zychius. "But what if history repeats itself?" he asked Takri. "It could happen." "Why does Icamus exist?" he asked Croesus. "The god of destruction is to released at the end of days. Geotac wanted to use him as a weapon. But that's over now. It's time for a rest." They flew off into the distance. 1 week later, Croesus, the son of Charheath and Simotac, walked up the hill in the large grassland. He felt more confident. Still mourning his grandfather, of course. The only physical difference was a marking on his hand that had been given to him by the Brotherhood of Akitsim to congratulate him. The sky was clear blue with many clouds, as usual. There was a slight breeze blowing the grass to one side. He reached the top of the hill to join Zychius, Takri, Zeke, and Thai. Croesus, said Thai, how have you been?" "Never better," said Croesus. "I'm still surprised about Geotac. I'd known him as a friend for 3 years, and I never suspected him of anything. Oh, and the mayor of Hydralis congratulates and thanks you." "That's nice, but I didn't do anything." The 4 of them looked at him shocked. "What the devil do you mean?" said Zychius. "I didn't defeat the Opolan. Geotac weakened it so I could reach Mount Tholine." "Yes, but you came fully equipped. I don't know any 14-year-old who would be brave enough to do what you did on Phylan Beach." "But I couldn't have done it without the sword." "Yes, but, all right, you needed the sword." Zychius laughed, but the point is that you used it. "Okay, but when I resealed Icamus, it wasn't me who defeated him. I had help from dead warriors. But it was your idea to use the talisman. You are a hero, Croesus." Takri and Thai agreed. Even Zeke spoke up. He put his hand on Croesus' shoulder. "I have weapons and I couldn't have done it. You don't, yet you did do those things." "Thanks." "That's comforting," said Croesus. "Oh, by the way, I was supposed to deliver this to you," said Thai, handing him a piece of parchment. "Croesus, you have called up to Viaco Daler Secker by the Minister of Tylaki. A second letter will arrive shortly with more details. You must attend in exactly 2 months. Signed, Fosk. I wonder what that's about, he said Croesus. We'll worry about that some other time, he said Zacchaeus. Well, goodbye for now. Croesus left the group and headed back to his home in Trubru village. The end. Based on the cancelled video game A Mystica by Joe Hutton-Lyons and Jamie Powell. Read the true version of the story, Tales of Mystria, Book 1, Croesus's Quest. Released in 2025, available on www.orbusstudios.com. That 300-page graphic novel is a labor of love, as was this terribly written story which serves as the prototype. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.